Welcome everyone to today's webinar. This is Getting Started with the Google Ad Grant. Now, the Google Ad Grant is a great opportunity for nonprofits to dip their feet into the world of paid advertising without spending money out of pocket. However, the program does come with certain compliance requirements. Unfortunately, today we have Jessica King of Getting Attention with us to walk you through the basics of Google's Ad Grant program. Jessica is the business lead at Getting Attention, where she helps nonprofits get the Google Ad Grant and manage it effectively to get the most from it. And today, Jessica is going to share her expertise with you. So please welcome Jessica King.
All right. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And I'm really excited to be here with everybody today. And we are going to be talking about an overview of the Google Ad Grant. So what it is, how to get it, and how it can be used. So pretty much exactly like we've already shared, I'm going to be covering today. What is the Google Ad Grant? I'm going to go into basically what the program is and kind of who's eligible. Then I will transition into, oh, my computer's sliding around here. We'll transition into talking about the application process. So what's required to apply, how to be successful. And then I'll wrap up by talking about what to do with it, both how to think about it, and then as you're evaluating metrics in your ads account, what sorts of things should you be looking for? How often should you be optimizing the account, etc. And as you know, David, our lovely host, has already shared, I'm the business lead at Getting Attention. What Getting Attention does is helps nonprofits to acquire the Google Ad Grant and to use it effectively. So that's sort of where I'm coming from with that. And then I'm hoping to save some time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So I'm going to go ahead and just dive right in. So I want to start out by just covering kind of what the Google Ad Grant is. So it is a program from Google. It's been running for a really long time, I think since 2003. So we are at 21 years of the Google Ad Grant in some form. And it provides up to $10,000 per month in search ads credits. So another way that you can think about this is like a $10,000 per month gift card that you can spend in Google search running ads. So as an example, I've pulled up a search that I did on my computer. So I searched help stray animals, and I'm in the Atlanta area. So I got served an ad for the Atlanta Humane Society. And you can see that it even features in the little headline here, stray or lost animals. So if I was searching for this, then I know that this is immediately relevant to what I was talking about. You can maybe hopefully see that they have highlighted a few different things. They have their locations and hours, they have donate today, they have a link to their adopt a pet form. So if you think about the types of people who are searching for helping stray animals, they've got links to make it super easy to many of the things that they might want to do while they're engaging with that program. They even have a call us link, which especially if I were searching this on my mobile device, which we know that most searchers these days are, I would have been able to get in touch with them right away. And you'll also notice that this result showed up above the organic results for this particular search. That doesn't happen 100% of the time, but it can and does with the ad grant. And so that's also one of the advantages of the program is you can appear at the top of the search results. You can put kind of whatever your power pages, your most important pages are forward for your people who are interested in supporting your cause, and you don't have to come up with an advertising budget to make that happen. So that's basically what the ad grant is in a nutshell. I want to talk really quick about who is eligible. And before I kind of dive into each of these, I do want to give a really quick caveat. You know, we at Getting Attention work mostly with US-based nonprofits. So that is the criteria that I am most familiar with. The ad grant is available in a lot of other countries. So if you are tuning in maybe from Ireland or from Australia or from Mexico or, you know, somewhere else in the world, there's a good chance that the ad grant is also available in your country, but you are going to want to just double check what the requirements are for you, just because every country has slightly different rules. So this sometimes looks slightly different. But broadly speaking, who is eligible? In the US, if you are registered as a 501c3, good news, you're very, very likely to be eligible for the ad grant. There are a couple of exceptions here that I'm going to dive into, but most 501c3s, the other important criteria is with a high quality website, are eligible for the ad grant. So the equivalent in a lot of other countries is whatever your charity registration is. So we've worked with some clients in Canada, for example, you have to be registered as a charity. That's usually going to be the case, but like I said, make sure just to double check if you're not in the US. Now, I did mention that there are a couple of types of organizations that are not eligible for the ad grant. So I'm going to dive into each of these, and then I will give you, again, with a big caveat that this is sort of just my best professional guess. This is not published anywhere, but I'll try and tell you what all these three have in common. So schools and educational institutions are not eligible for the Google Ad Grant. Google does have a suite of products that's available for you if you are a university, like a K through 12 school, something like that. Then you can look into Google for Education. Um, Hospitals and healthcare organizations are another category of organizations that are not eligible. And the last would be governmental entities. And so looking across this list, they seem kind of random. And I'm sure there are probably at least a few of you sitting on this call going like, well, we're not a healthcare organization. Maybe we are actually a community services organization, but we, do a vaccine clinic every year, or we do you have a daycare? Do we count as an educational institution, et cetera? I think if you are looking at these and you think that there is a good case that you probably would be eligible, I always kind of just recommend people go ahead and apply because generally speaking, my experience has been that Google is not ridiculously strict about these things. And there's ways, which we'll talk about in the application section in just a second, to set yourself up to get approved smoothly. But this is where we get into sort of just like my kind of professional judgment guess as to what these have in common is I think it is public funding. So this is not published anywhere. This is just my sort of understanding of this. But I think what Google is trying to avoid with these exclusion criterias is getting into any situations where maybe, the advertising plus public funding relationship just gets a little murky. So I think if you are looking at this and you're going, well, we don't really accept any, like we don't have any, public funding that is going into our mission, and most of our mission is not really focused on, education or on some of these other things. There's a good chance that you might be eligible. So I would say, when in doubt, go ahead and apply. So moving on from eligibility to just like an overview of like, okay, so we know what the grant is, we know it provides us search ads, and we know who's eligible and who's not, at least broadly. Then what are the uses that you might put the ad grant to? What can it support? What is the purpose of it? And I think you should be thinking about the Google Ad Grant like a marketing grant. So you can think about, where you might be putting marketing effort. These can be good things to support with the Google Ad Grant. So as an example, donation opportunities is one of the most common things that I hear nonprofits talk about and that they are interested in supporting with the Google Ad Grant. That's definitely possible. But I'd like to encourage the crowd here to think a little bit more broadly than that and also to make sure that your sort of like expectations of it are realistic because I think sometimes when I say we can run ads, we can promote opportunities for folks to donate, what the nonprofit understands is, this is like a donation machine. I turn it on and immediately I'm going to get, 400 million donations and all of our problems are going to be solved. That's not quite the way it works. It is more like marketing. So you are showing people, you are bringing them the opportunity to support you basically, and you can start to narrow down who that audience is through the keywords you choose to target, which we'll talk about a little bit later today. But donation opportunities is a huge one, and we do get folks who regularly get donations through their Google Ad Grant. Upcoming events is another huge one. So when I talk about this, you can promote a number of different types of events that your organization might be running. So you could have, let's say you're like an animal shelter, for example. You might have a clear the shelters event or like a come meet the puppies, adopt a puppy and bring one home type of event, right? It's very mission focused. But you also might have like your fundraising 5K or a gala or something like that that you do. You can also promote those via the ad grant as well. Volunteer recruitment would be another huge one. So if you have openings at your nonprofit for volunteers, a variation on this that I've seen nonprofits do before are also job openings. I've seen them promote it via the Google Ad Grant. That's another possibility. So if you are, let's say, a community services organization where you're like, hey, we have a free meal program, but what we need is somebody to stand there and package up the food and hand them to our community members, then that might be a good use of the ad grant. And what I think that the ad grant is really best suited for and where it really shines are awareness building goals or growing that sort of base of supporters who are aware of you, are aware of the work that you're doing, and are beginning to come in and get engaged. And I think that awareness goals sometimes get a bad rap in the world of marketing because, I think most people want to have a really, really tangible outcome. And I think that there are ways to do that within the Google Ad Grant. What I recommend for folks is when you are running awareness programs, make sure that you're also backing it up with other ways that folks can continue to support you. So, for example, when you're running a awareness campaign, it might be a good idea to encourage your supporters to sign up for your newsletter. Capture those emails so that you can continue that relationship beyond the point where the user leaves the website, so for example. So, those are the types of things that you can put the Google Ad Grant towards. I also just want to answer a couple of questions because I get these frequently, which is like, does the ad grant, do we have to keep reapplying for the ad grant over and over once we get it? The answer is if you stay in good standing with the ad grant, no. You get it one time, it renews monthly in perpetuity until and unless Google changes something about the program. So as long as you meet the requirements, you're good. It's a one-time apply thing. To keep the grant every month, there are a couple things you have to do. You have to get at least one conversion. And I'm going to say this word and I'm going to define it right now. Conversion means a meaningful action that somebody takes on your website, and you do get to choose what that is. So, as an example, that might be submitting your donate form, might be signing up for a newsletter. It might be playing a video that maybe makes a case for support. It could be even just arriving on a key page. There are lots of different possibilities for what could be a conversion. And so, what I encourage folks to think about when they're thinking about setting up their conversions is what are the things that are going to move the needle for your nonprofit? So, for a lot of organizations, this is going to be like an online donation submitted, a volunteer submitted. Um, you might have further sort of step down ways of people engaging with you, maybe sharing their phone number so they can get text updates, things like that. But you want to make sure that you're pairing some of these very, very like bottom line, I guess I'll call them needle movers with conversions that might be a little bit of a lighter ask or a little bit of a smaller ask for folks. So the example I always use for this would be like giving someone your email. If you think about you just even in your personal life, you've probably given like 3 different companies your email in the past month. And probably just didn't think much about it to, you know, unlock a webinar or to, sign up for a free service or something like that, right? Like folks are very willing to engage in this way. And so by having that combination, you can make sure that you're hitting that one conversion per month requirement from Google. So got to keep one conversion at least per month. The second one is you have to maintain at least a 5% click-through rate. So when I say 5% click-through rate, what I mean is that at least 5% of the people who see your ads need to click on them. Now, this is across your entire account. So it is sometimes possible, and this happens sometimes with our clients, where you might have one ad that is got a really crazy high click-through rate, like maybe it's like 40 or 50%. Then you might have one ad that has more like a 2 or 3% click-through rate. That's okay. That's normal. That happens. But you want to make sure across your account that you have at least a 5% click-through rate. Just to sort of like peel back the curtain here a little bit on what Google's goal with that is. Google, as a company, makes money and is incentivized to show ads that are as relevant as possible. And so that 5% click-through rate for folks who have the ad grant is a requirement so that you are doing the work to make sure that your ads are as strong as possible, that you are running ads on keywords that are going to be relevant to your organization, that you are trying to reach the right audiences, et cetera, because Google doesn't basically want to give nonprofits free money and then have the nonprofits show people a bunch of bad ads that cause Google's users to say, maybe Bing is actually the right fit for me, right? So you want to make sure as you're thinking about the ad grant that you're also kind of thinking about what Google's incentives are behind some of these requirements. And then the other thing, which is very broad, we could talk about it more maybe in the Q&A section if people do have questions, but there are some best practices for like account structure, for keywords, especially keyword quality, for the bid strategy you should use, for the ad quality. None of these are quite at the same level, I will say, as like one conversion and 5% CTR in the sense that these just sort of pop up occasionally, and they're usually very quick to resolve. For example, if you are trying to advertise on a keyword that Google says is like too low quality, you can just pause that keyword. These are usually pretty quick fixes, and they are generally not as like routinely enforced as these other two, which is why I've sort of lumped them together. But these would be the other things you want to be striving for over time in your ad grant account. So Assuming you stay in good standing, the ad grant keeps renewing. So that is a little bit of the overview. Now I want to transition into the application process, which is something that a lot of nonprofits that I talk to are very intimidated by. Good news is you do not need to be. I think those of you who are, familiar with GrantStation and maybe work in grants yourself or have a lot of familiarity with grants, this is sort of um, the grant that isn't a grant. It is called a grant, but it is a piece of cake to get through. So I'm going to talk about first how to prepare for your application. Then I'm going to talk about what the application process actually looks like. So in prepping for the application, you may remember that I said that the two eligibility criteria were be a 501(c)(3) and have a high quality website. Now we're going to dive into what a high quality website actually looks like. So there are three things that Google puts forward in their website policy. So we're going to go from easiest to hardest here. We've got SSL certification, organization information, and mission relevant unique content. So we're going to dive into each of those in a little bit more depth. Starting with SSL certification. This is one that if you are not a very tech savvy person, you may be like looking at this and going, I don't even know what a socket is. What is a secure sockets layer? This sounds really complicated. And the good news for you is that while there is a sort of like complicated backstory there, this is almost never a barrier for people, in my experience. So secure sockets layer is basically a sign to Google that information that's being transmitted in your website. So as an example, potentially donor information, if folks are donating to you, is going to be managed securely. So you'll remember that earlier I kind of said, when you're thinking about the Google Ad Grant, it's helpful to think about what Google's incentives are with some of these things, right? So if Google is running ads for your nonprofit and somebody trusting Google clicks on the ad, enters their donation information, and let's say you have a massive security breach, that could reflect very poorly on Google. There is a possibility that that user might go back and be like, well, the only reason I clicked on this site was because Google told me to, right? So Google's basically saying, hey, you got to contain information securely on your site. This is a pretty easy thing to check, especially if you're using Chrome as your browser, the way you do it. You can see I used Getting Attention's website as an example here. There's a little icon. It kind of looks like two lollipops on their side. And so if you click on that, you will see something, ideally, that says connection is secure. And if you click on that, again, it'll say security, say connection is secure, and certificate is valid. That is how you tell if you have your SSL certification. Almost every website seems to have this by default. So this is not something that I usually see that is a barrier to people. If what you are seeing does not look like this, get in touch with whoever runs your website because honestly, SSL certification is just a best practice for managing sort of your digital presence and making sure that the information that is being shared on your website is secure. But like I said, this one takes about 2 minutes to check and is typically not a barrier. So assuming you are like most nonprofits and we've checked that box, let's move on to organization information. So what we want to be looking for here is, does your website have enough information on it to let new users know more about who you are? So there's no hard and fast rules for this. Google doesn't have like a set, it has to have this, and this, but some good places to start include your mission and your vision statement. So as an example, I have included a screenshot from one of our clients here. For their mission, they say, we are a not-for-profit dedicated to educating and raising awareness about adolescent depression, encouraging good mental health, and breaking down the stigma surrounding mental health issues. Great. If I landed on their website and didn't know what their whole mission was about, I would have an idea of it from that statement. So it doesn't have to be anything super long, doesn't have to be like 5 paragraphs of your history or anything like that, just a couple of sentences saying like, what do you exist to do? What is your mission? Another huge one that that's surprising how many organizations do not have this is contact information. So how can people reach out to you via email? Is there a phone number that they can call? If you have a physical address, where is it? Can folks come visit you? If not, is there like a mailing address? Things like that. Make sure that people can get in touch with you in case they have questions, in case they want to know more. And then the last thing, which is a nice to have, but I do recommend it, is putting your EIN. So, your tax registration for your charity registration, essentially, on the website. It is optional. I've not seen people get disapproved for the ad grant without having it, but I do think it's a nice to have for 2 reasons. One, when Google is checking your website to verify that you're a real nonprofit, that will allow them to check that box quickly. The other thing is, if folks have not heard of you yet, but are moved by your mission and are interested in making a donation, you make their due diligence a little bit easier as far as them just verifying that you actually are a nonprofit, you actually do what you say you do. There are a lot of websites out there for folks who claim to be nonprofits who do not seem to actually be registered anywhere. So putting that EIN can be a real, trust builder for your organization. So we've covered the SSL certification. We've covered the basic organization information. Now we're into mission relevant content, which I think is one of the broadest categories. And this is, I think, where nonprofits sometimes get stuck. So to get good results with the Google Ad Grant, your organization should have content on your website that is up to date, that is relevant to your mission, and that is also relevant to what people are searching for. And there is some good news in this, which is that like you don't have to have the most perfect website on the whole planet in order to get started with the ad grant, to begin running ads. Um, Honestly, having at least a handful of pages that probably already exist on your site is going to be enough. But I've pulled an example here from one of our clients, which is Claire's Place Foundation. They are a organization that promotes they do both some like patient support, but then mostly does research to end cystic fibrosis. And so they have a page, for example, that says like, what does it mean to have cystic fibrosis? And they talk about how, this is a chronic disease. They talk about like what is the average cost, not including prescription medication and then the medication that the folks have to take who have it, how many hours a day patients spend doing treatments and how many days are spent at the hospital, et cetera. So this is an example of what I mean, where not only could somebody answer the question like, what is cystic fibrosis? It's a disease. It has problems in their lungs, digestive system, and sinuses, but it also begins to delve into some of these follow-on questions that folks might have, which is like, how long do people with CF normally have to stay in the hospital? How much does it cost to have CF, et cetera? The other thing that this is doing, I think this is a pretty impactful piece of content, which is why I like to talk about it. But the other thing that it is doing, it is already building the case for why Claire's Place Foundation, excuse me, exists and what they are doing to kind of remedy the problem. So, they have this donate call to action up in the corner, but you know, if you didn't understand that the medical cost for CF patients is very high, that there's these prescription medications that they need to buy in addition, you may or may not be compelled to donate. So mission relevant content, I think if you're looking for one or two just kind of takeaways here, I would do two things. One, there are a couple of free tools from Google, and we can talk about a couple of those in a little bit. But there are some tools from Google that allow you kind of see what your website already shows up for in Google searches, see how people are reaching your site today. Looking at information like that can be really, really helpful if you're thinking about getting started with the grant, because part of what you are trying to do with the grant is marry your own understanding of what your organization is, what it does, et cetera. You've got the correct understanding, but your website may or may not be conveying that information in a way that Google can read and that Google can understand. So you want to be looking at, okay, where are there gaps? And where there are gaps, how can we fill those gaps using our content? And Google is kind of constantly recrawling all of the pages on the internet that it's aware of. So its understanding will improve over time if you make these changes. But that would be one thing. And then the other thing that I will say is like, if you're kind of looking for like, how do I get started with this? How do I understand what needs to change, et cetera? Most of the tricks for search engine optimization or SEO, dealing with the organic side of Google, are also going to be beneficial for the Google Ad Grant for this paid side of Google because they both use Google's search engine and they both use Google's kind of intelligence infrastructure. I'm not the most technologically savvy when it comes to machine learning topics, so excuse me if that is maybe not the most precise language for it. But basically, what you are trying to do is in both of those fields, you're kind of trying to guide Google's understanding. So, looking into SEO and kind of SEO best practices and then pairing that with the Google Ad Grant, usually that works out pretty nicely. They are different functions, so don't get them twisted, but they very much complement each other. All right. So we've our website. We've done an overhaul. We're managing donations securely. We've got all our organization information there. Our phones are ringing off the hook. Maybe not yet, but they could be. And we've got all of our content squared away. We are ready to go. talk about the actual application process, and I'll give you some pieces of advice for going through this. So, first of all, first piece of advice, I would strongly recommend if your organization has organization-specific emails, I would recommend using those to apply. So, as an example, like John at yournonprofit.org is going to be a bit better than like John at gmail.com because it basically just shows that you are a member of the organization on whose behalf you're applying. Not a non-starter, but when you can do that, that is going to be a benefit. What you are going to do, this is, I'm going to call it a two-step process. You could also kind of think of it as like a 2.5-step process. So the first step is going to be applying for Google for Nonprofits. Basically, if you kind of want to picture this in your head, Google for Nonprofits is actually the program that provides the ad grant to nonprofits. So the first thing that you need to do is get enrolled in this program that gives you access to the ad grant. So this application process is super, super simple. It is a lot more like signing up for a software or like if you've ever signed up for a Netflix trial, you can sign up for the Google for Nonprofits account. What will happen basically, you'll fill in a little bit of information, you'll include your website, you'll include your EIN, you'll include your mission statement, you'll answer just a couple of questions about like how you would categorize your organization, and you will submit it to Google. What Google will do is they will send it to their validation partner. You can kind of think of them as like a background checker for Google, which is Percent. Back in the day, it used to be TechSoup. They've since moved away from that. Now they're working with Percent. And Percent is basically going to verify all the details. One piece of advice that I have for you, if you are one of those organizations that maybe is like a bit of an edge case. So, as an example, we work with an organization that does some fundraising for underfunded schools in Mexico. And when they were applying for the ad grant, they kept getting rejected because Google understood them to be a education institution, like a school themselves. This has actually happened to a few different clients, and particularly in the education sector, I run into this. I think that might just be a quirk of our client list, but what we have found to be effective there would be you can go to Percent and you can actually look up your organization in their database. And I would recommend claiming the organization if you haven't already. So if you are the person in charge of marketing, or maybe you're the executive director, we go ahead and fill that out. So Percent may ask you a couple of questions, particularly, again, make sure you use that organizational email. But basically what you were doing is kind of already getting your ducks in a row with the background checker. You can kind of clarify any misunderstandings, et cetera, that might exist around what your mission is, what you do, et cetera, with them first. Then go back to Google, submit the application as usual. And because you have already cleared everything up with Percent, usually that application process is pretty smooth. So that would be kind of my recommendation. If you think you have an edge case and you're not sure and you want to make this process as smooth as possible, go ahead, look yourself up on Percent, try and claim that profile, make sure you get everything in line there, and then go back and do that Google for Nonprofits application. What will happen after you submit that application is usually it takes 1 to 3 business days. Every once in a while, it takes a little longer. It kind of just depends on how much Google is processing at any given moment. But usually within 1 to 3 days, you will get an email back saying, ideally, congratulations, you've been accepted into Google for Nonprofits. Now you have all these tools available to you. Log in, you'll see a few different things. First of all, you will get access to Google's like Office suite of products or work suite of products. So say like Gmail, Google Docs, Google Calendar, etc. Those are some of them. You get access to YouTube for nonprofits. You get access to the Google Ad Grant, which we'll talk about in a second. And you get access to Google Earth for nonprofits. So you get a suite of products, of which one of them is the Ad Grant. Applying for the ad grant is ridiculously simple now. It used to be, it was never really hard, but it used to be a little bit more complicated than it is today. Literally, what you do when you log in, there will be a list of logos, including the ads logo, and there will be a little button next to the ads logo that says Activate Products. You'll click on it. There will be a video. Watch the video. Let them know that you watched the video and submit. Once you submit your application, again, usually 1 to 3 business days is common. Every once in a while, it'll take a little longer, but usually it's a fairly quick turnaround. You will get a couple of emails, ideally, if things went well, from Google Ads. One of them will be saying, "Congratulations, you are part of the Google Ad Grant program. We're going to send you a couple of other setup emails. Please take the actions that are set out in the setup email when you get them. Please do take those because they will send you two things. They'll send you one to get your Ad Grants profile set up. They'll send you one that is really a formality to set up billing. You don't actually have to set up billing, you just have to click this link. And in fact, this is another important note for anybody here. If you ever find yourself in a situation when you are trying to set this up where you have to put in credit card information, pause, go back because you are in the regular ads account, not the ad grants account. And you don't want to do that because you will accidentally spend money on a real credit card. The ad grant account does not ask for any sort of payment information. So again, if you are being asked to connect payment information, you are in the wrong place. Um, but yeah, ideally you are getting kind of both of those emails. Do click those links because they do expire after 2 weeks and it is a pain to get Google support to send you new ones. So I would really recommend, even if you're not 100% sure what your strategy is yet, you're not 100% ready to start launching ads, I do recommend just at least setting up the account because you have a little bit of grace before you have to sort of get stuff rolling. And it's better to just have the account up with nothing in it than to lose the link and then need to have them resend it. The other possibility is it is possible that you may get a email that is like, sorry, you have not been approved for the ad grants program. In my experience, typically when this happens, it is due to website quality. So usually Google will give you some recommendations on what they found lacking, or basically they will say, hey, here's what's missing. You can fix those and then you can reapply for the ad grant. So it is not punitive. It is not like a one strike you're out type of thing. But usually they lay it out. One thing I've noticed and that I will kind of share for the group here is sometimes I have gotten feedback of like, this was rejected because the website loaded too slowly. If you know websites loading too slowly is a complaint that people have about your website, then that might actually be worth looking into. But sometimes it happens for me for sites that I have never had a problem with loading. And sometimes that just means on the particular day that Google checked and at the particular time, maybe on that person's particular computer, it loaded too slowly. Sometimes it's worth just resubmitting it and seeing what happens because usually in situations like that, I've gotten it approved on the second go. So again, to recap the application process, use your organizational email. We're going to apply for Google for Nonprofits first. Then once we get approved for that, we're going to log in. We're going to watch the video, submit for the Google Ad Grant, and then ideally we will get a series of instructional emails. We're going to follow those instructions once we get them because we don't want to have to ask for new links. And then you will be all set up with your shiny profile. So now I kind of want to transition into talking about how to use the ad grant. And so we already talked kind of broadly about like what sorts of things could you support with marketing. But one point that I like to make here is that you should be using the Google Ad Grant as part of your nonprofit's marketing toolkit. So in the same way that you wouldn't just like go to try and fix up an entire house with just a hammer, you would bring a lot of different tools. You might have like a saw, you might have a nail gun, you might have a screwdriver, like all these different things, right? The ad grant is one tool in your marketing toolkit. So it should be used to complement and maybe to boost some of your other marketing efforts, but it does not replace the efforts that you are already putting in to build out content, to build out your lists, to make really effective donation appeals, things like that. You want to make sure that you're kind of thinking about it in that way because usually when I see folks who are disappointed with the ad grant, what they were expecting it to do is be sort of this golden goose that was going to fix all of the problems that their nonprofit has. That's not very realistic for really any marketing channel. And so you don't want to be kind of putting all of your eggs in one basket. You want to be using it to support, to reinforce some of the things that you are already doing. I also just want to talk about like how to decide what a good goal to pair with the ad grant is, because I think this is another thing that nonprofits sometimes go round and round about. So the first thing to think about, I think that's most important, is like, what are the outcomes that you are looking for? And usually this is not too terribly hard. Usually organizations already have a few ideas about this. So, as an example, you might be like, we're looking to drive more donations. We're looking to expand our list, especially in the under 30 demographic. We're looking to recruit more volunteers, et cetera. Usually you kind of know, but you want to think about what are those most important outcomes. The next question to ask yourself is search well suited to support your goals? And I think a good like rule of thumb or a good sort of exercise to do as you're thinking through this would be to picture the problem or picture sort of the outcome and picture is somebody realistically Googling that? So as an example, you know, someone might see a stray dog running around their neighborhood and they may search, how to help stray animal, what to do, found dog, things like that. You can realistically imagine that. Somebody is not sitting at their computer Googling, how do I donate $10 million to the Humane Society, right? So if major gifts or capital campaigns, like things like that, are some of your most important outcomes, search may not be the right marketing tool to use for that. That might not be the correct way to support that goal. In that instance, you would be much better off calling up some of your most important major donors and saying, hey, did you know that this, problem with people abandoning their animals has gotten worse and worse, and like your support means a lot to us, etc. So we want to be thinking about, is search going to be the right channel for this? And then also, what gaps might you need to close? So this could be content. I'm actually going to go forward here because I think I've explained a lot of these in more detail on the second slide, but this might be content related. So does your website have content that even addresses this? If you are, let's say, we'll stick with that animal shelter example. If you're an animal shelter and you're like, hey, we want to show up for keywords on free spay and neuter, but we actually don't even have a page on our website that mentions that we have a free spay and neuter program at all, then people are going to have a hard time finding you, and Google's going to have a hard time associating that with your website because there's no content. So you want to make sure that you have content that addresses whatever you're trying to show up with. You want to make sure users can take the next action. So again, sticking with that maybe like free vet clinic example, maybe you have a free vet clinic, but if nobody can make an appointment or even register that they're interested, then people are going to just leave. They're not going to take that next action. And then the last gap that you also want to be thinking about is your team's skills and your team's time. So, is there upskilling that needs to happen? Do you need to bring in outside help? Things like that. I also want to talk a little bit about how search ads work because I think this will help you to be a little bit more successful in your advertising. So, this is digging really deep. This is for those folks who maybe sat through the first half going, yes, I already have the Google Ad Grant. This is all very well and good, but how do I use it? This is the sort of part of the presentation that is aimed at you. So, when Google has an opportunity to show an ad. So this is true anytime somebody makes a Google search. You've also probably seen Google ads. Google has a huge ad network. Not all of them are Google Ad Grant applicable, but you know, Google has opportunities to show ads all the time. But whenever it can show an ad, it goes through a process that it calls the Google Ads auction. And this happens super, super quickly. What it is looking at is, at least in search, is a few things. So let's say I type in animal shelter, right? It's looking at a few things. First of all, it's looking at the competitiveness of that keyword. So how many organizations, how many different advertisers are trying to show up on that keyword? You can imagine that in a place like Atlanta, where I live, pretty big population, pretty big metro, there are a lot of animal shelters around here. There's at least 5 or 6 that I can think of, right? And probably a lot more. Um, but if I were in a really rural area, like where I used to live in Blacksburg, Virginia, go Hokies, there is a lot less competition for that keyword. There's just fewer animal shelters out there. So competitiveness is one. Bid is another one. This is one that you don't have to worry about, actually. That's one of the nice things about the ad grant. So I would recommend for your bid strategy setting it to maximize conversions, which is basically just going to tell Google, put however much money towards this as you think will bring in as many conversions as possible. But normally bid is a consideration. Ad quality is another one. So, is your ad engaging? Does it seem to be related to what the person searched? So, as an example, if I search animal shelter, I don't really want to see an ad that has like maybe the summary of a school field trip to the animal shelter on it. Like that just simply does not have to do with what I am looking for, right? And so I'm very unlikely to click on that ad. And the other thing would be landing page quality. So how good is the page that people are being directed to once they click on the ad? So Google looks at all of those things, rumbles it around in its brain, and makes a call on what it thinks is going to be the best ad to show the user. And it's going to show that ad. So when you, as the advertiser, are thinking through your approach, especially within the Google Ad Grant, we want to be thinking about, okay, the competitiveness of the keyword, the quality of the ad, the quality of the languages. These are the three levers that we can pull to make our ads do more for us, to show up, to be able to get folks to our site. So that is one thing that I wanted to sort of share. And there's a number of different ways that you can evaluate these different types of things. Some of these are metrics that Google can give you, and we'll talk about that when we talk about keyword research. The other thing you can always do is just like if you're thinking about a keyword, punch it in to Google a bunch of times, maybe from a few different locations in your town, maybe from a few different devices, toggle incognito and not incognito mode. Just get a sense for like what ads are being shown. Are there ads being shown? If so, whose are they? Where are they going? And just kind of do some research and be thinking like, does our organization stack up with what I'm seeing here? You also want to learn how to research keywords. So the key metrics that we are looking for are volume, cost per click, and then this one is not really a metric per se, but you want to be thinking about search intent. Another way that you'll hear marketers talk about this is funnel position. So basically, how close to taking an action is a person who's searching for this keyword? So like, as an example, if I'm searching dog breeds, I may just be like a 10-year-old who's kind of interested in dogs, right? Versus if I search golden retriever puppies for adoption, that's someone who's probably pretty serious. That's somebody who is looking and trying to adopt a dog. So those are like some different examples of search intent. This is where we're getting, again, really into the nitty gritty. So continuing on this topic of keyword research, I want to give you a few tools for the job because I think there are a couple that folks on this call might find beneficial. The first is going to be Keyword Planner. So this is available in Google Ads. It is a free tool. It uses Google's own data. It is provided by Google. And one thing that's kind of cool about it is it can give you insights about your website. So you can punch in your website. You can say, okay, great. This is what Google thinks we could advertise on. It's a good way to see how Google regards your site and what associations it has with your website as it exists today. There are also third-party tools. So I've put the logos of a few of them that I like up here. Most of them do have some sort of limited free tier, so you can look at that. SEMrush and SpyFu would be my recommendations for paid advertising. Moz is a little bit better for organic. They use their own data, but one of the advantages to pairing this is it lets you search competitors. So if I am Atlanta Humane Society, then maybe I am looking at Paws Atlanta, which is another animal shelter, and saying, are they showing up on different searches? What types of keywords are they going after? What types of ad text are they using, et cetera? So there can be some value there if you're struggling to show up in looking at what are other similar organizations doing and how can we mimic that for ourselves. When you are looking at keywords, again, I'm going to repeat this and I'm also going to explain what each of these are in a little bit more detail. You want to be looking at volume. So volume for keyword means how many times is it searched per month? Generally speaking, bigger is going to be usually a little higher up the funnel. So you can picture the number of people who search, let's say, good dogs for families, and the number of people who search like golden doodle puppies near me are going to be pretty different, right? So um, smaller volume sometimes means they're closer to taking an action. Smaller volume can also just mean not many people are interested in that topic. So you want to be pairing these with a few other metrics, right? So volume is one, how many people are searching for it. Generally speaking, we want more, but there are some cases in which we might go for a less high volume keyword. And some of those cases might come down to competition. So if you can picture, I'll stick with this pet example because I think this is often pretty easy. If you are an animal shelter, you might be like, great, what types of things are people who are going to adopt a kitten looking for? They're looking for, I know, kitten food. If you try and advertise on kitten food, you are going to have a real tough time because, PetSmart, Chewy, Petco, half the vets in your area, like there's going to be a lot of different organizations that all have very legitimate reasons to advertise on this kitten food keyword, who are going to be showing up. And so the good news about the ad grant is it is its own separate ad auction that's separate from regular paid ads, but it's still worth thinking about the fact that like you are probably not the only one showing up on that versus, you know, kittens at no kill shelter. That might be a great keyword because the people who are looking for that are looking for animal shelters, just cuts down the competition by quite a bit. The thing you have to pair that with is, though, are people searching for that? That's where that volume comes in. Cost is not a huge one for the Google Ad Grant, but it is worth looking at. So If you were to manually set the cost that you are willing to tell Google, you do have a $2 cap to that. And we can talk about more in depth on that if folks want more explanation there in the Q&A. But what cost is generally reflective of, it kind of reflects that competition metric. It kind of reflects how valuable Google thinks these keywords are for people. So if you are in a really competitive space, good chance that your costs are going to be high. The reason that this is relevant is just because the main things that you can do to lower your cost is basically be the most dialed in. So, like as an example, if I search the Red Cross, there's a good chance that the Red Cross is actually going to have an ad running at the top of the search results. And if I click on that, Google is going to say, well, yeah, the Red Cross is highly, highly, highly relevant to the search term Red Cross. So we're going to give this search to them at a fairly low cost versus, let's say, just making something up here, but like let's say Save the Children, they might try to show up on the Red Cross because, maybe they consider that to be a kind of a competitive organization, or they know that people who are interested in the Red Cross are also interested in Save the Children. Again, I'm making this up. But Google's going to look at them and say, well, your website is not half as relevant to the topic of Red Cross as the Red Cross's website. So we are going to show your ad at a much higher cost per click. You need to be giving us more money. I think this is a little bit easier to picture if you kind of consider businesses competing. You can kind of understand that Google would charge more for kind of low quality, not very related terms to show up because they want to make sure if we're going to run the risk of showing our users a bad ad, we want to make sure we get paid for it. So that same mechanism still does apply in the ad grant account. It just looks a little different. And then relevance is not a metric that is given anywhere, but it is, again, it is kind of the thread that ties all of this together. And it is one of the things that you can control. My best recommendation for figuring out relevance is only typing your search into Google and seeing what comes up because what you are being served, and I would do this in incognito mode as well so that Google isn't using your own browsing history, but that is what Google is going to consider the most relevant for that term. So you want to be searching for that and kind of seeing what pops up. All right, got a couple more slides. Stick with me, and then we will get to the Q&A. So when you are constructing a campaign, this is another question that we get, and this is like honestly could be a webinar of its own, but the things that you want to be thinking about is segmentation. You basically want to always be kind of grouping like with like. So we want to segment our campaigns in logical ways with distinct keyword groups. So one way you could do that would be like by outcome. So for example, you might have one for your vet program, one for your adopt a cat program, one for your after school volunteer program, what have you. Maybe by donations, like this is our donation campaign. So we're putting all the keywords that have to do with surfacing donations in here, our volunteers campaign, maybe a blog campaign, etc. When you are picking landing pages, you want to pick a few that have a good user experience. They should feature keywords that are going to be relevant to the outcome and relevant to the like keyword group that you are trying to target. So as an example, with volunteers, you want to make sure that the landing page has all of the information that they'll need about how do I volunteer? What are the benefits of volunteering? How often can I volunteer? All of these different things, and lets the user take an immediate relevant next action. So, click here to submit your volunteer form. Great, perfect. And then the last thing is when you are grouping keywords, you want them to be relevant to your organization and your outcome. So I would not really recommend mixing all of your different keywords into one campaign. The effect of that is just going to be that Google's going to get a little confused and not really be able to figure out who it should show what to. So segmenting it and grouping like with like, usually a good way to do that. So this pretty much just reinforces what I already said. Choose highly relevant keywords, group like with like, choose goal and oriented conversion actions. Last couple of thoughts here. First is I get the question, how often should I be checking my campaigns? The short answer is it depends. When you are launching something new, Google needs some time to begin gathering data uninterrupted. So we do recommend not really touching it for a month, especially if you're not a really confident Google Ads user. Once you start getting some data into the account, though, you will likely want to implement tweaks and keep up with that data pretty regularly. So ideally, you want to be checking your campaigns every week for potential improvement opportunities, but also you want to be balancing that with the understanding that sometimes you'll make changes and they'll take a while to show results. So if you make, 10 changes at once and something changes in your outcomes, you're going to be like, well, that's great, my outcome changed, but I don't know which of the inputs that I created caused it. So, you know, check weekly, but you do generally speaking want to be giving things 2 weeks to a month to cook is not a bad time frame to have in the back of your mind. And I think this is the last slide, am I right? Yeah. Last slide. 4 key metrics to take away from here. So the things you want to be keeping an eye on in your account. You want to be looking at click-through rate. Obviously, this is very important because it relates to you keeping the account. Generally speaking, click-through rate higher is usually going to be better, and we want that number to be above 5%. You want more clicks. This is how many folks are visiting your site. Conversions, again, how many people are taking that meaningful action on your website. For most of these, more is better. There may be edge cases where we're looking for something lower for various reasons, but generally speaking, these are going to be better. And then total ad spend. I put this one at the end because I do want to talk about something that I see people get hung up on sometimes with the ad grant account. I see people say, we need to be spending that full $10,000 or else it was, a failure. And that's not really true because you may be able to accomplish your goals and you may be able to sort of reach your entire addressable market, reach the folks who are interested in you using only a portion of that ad grant money. You may not need that full 10K to address your goals. I see this sometimes with smaller local organizations. So it's important to take your ad grant spend into account in conjunction with all of these other things. Because if you're getting a really high click-through rate, if you're getting tons of clicks to your site, if you're getting a lot of conversions, but you're only spending, let's say, 5K, that's actually, I would consider it a fairly healthy and fairly robust ad grant account. So that was why I think of these 4 metrics, it's the least important one in my mind. I think conversions, if I had to pick one that was the most important, that's probably what I would say is the most important. But all worth keeping in mind and all worth kind of viewing in conjunction with each other. All right. So that has been a really ranging topics for folks, hopefully at kind of any phase of the ad grant experience. I want to open up the floor for questions, and then while I'm looking at the Q&A here, I will also leave my contact information up so that if I don't have a opportunity to get to your question and you want to follow up with me, please feel free to send me an email. You can also check out Getting Attention website has tons of resources about the Google Ad Grant. You can also, of course, connect with me on LinkedIn. All right. So one question that I got is, do you have to be using Google Analytics in order to participate, in the Google Ad Grant program? You do not have to use Google Analytics in order to participate. It's not like a requirement. What I will say is I do recommend it, or I at least recommend using Google Tag Manager. And the reason for that is this. Google Tag Manager is basically a tool that without getting kind of like too technical with it, it basically lets Google Ads know when certain key events have fired on your website. So if someone goes in and let's say clicks the donate button, you might want to track that. That might be a relevant outcome for your ad. So you may want to get set up with Google Analytics, and I would actually say Google Tag Manager is a little more effective for this, but you could use either one to set up those conversion events. That's really where Google Analytics is going to fit into that picture. So not required, strongly recommended. Google Ads will tell you that it can set up sort of like default conversion actions through Google Ads. I find that the tracking on that usually is not very accurate. So I wouldn't really recommend going with that. I would recommend setting it up either through Analytics or through Tag Manager. Oh, another good question. So this is about eligibility. I saw a question that says, are organizations that have a 501c3 fiscal sponsor, are fiscally sponsored organizations eligible? Fortunately, the answer to that one is no. The other ones that I get commonly are like, our 501c6 is eligible. Unfortunately not. It has got to be a 501c3. You've got to be your own 501c3. Um, Let me see. Oh, this is a good one. So, will language affect how Google Ads boosts us? We are a US NGO that serves a lot of Spanish-speaking clientele. We have Spanish content and would be targeting Google searches in Spanish. So, it will impact who your content reaches, but over time that should be a good thing. So, generally speaking, like if you have browsers who have not ever looked for anything in Spanish language, um, I would be a great example. I speak Spanish, so I have never done a search in Spanish, so I do not get Spanish language ads. I do speak German. I do occasionally look for things in German, so I do occasionally get German language ads. Google is going to be looking for Spanish-speaking folks over time. So what that means is that you as an organization, you do have the opportunity to run ads in both English and Spanish and to your English and Spanish language content. What I would recommend there is really be thinking about how these two different like personas, what types of ads might they need? And I would probably, this is an instance where I would recommend having separate campaigns for each of those, because you want to make sure that you're kind of keeping all your Spanish language stuff consistent. You make sure you're reaching the right personas over here. And then if you have English language stuff, are you reaching your English language personas? Keep all their stuff over here. Okay. If an organization previously applied years ago to the Google Ad Grant but no longer knows their login, should they reapply and create a new Google login, or is there a way you can find the account like on my end? Yeah, I would. This is a situation we see all the time because organizations do typically have a like I've seen organizations that have like an intern who applied, or there's like our old marketing director applied and now we don't know where the password is, etc. There is a form and you can do some searching. And honestly, if you're not able to come up with it yourself, send me an email and I can find it and send it to you. But please do look for it yourself first. But there is a form that Google has that basically says, hey, the administrator on my account is no longer here. Like, we don't know who the administrator is. And basically what they'll do is Google support will first start by sending an email. So it may be that like sometimes what happens is like your boss secretly was the one who made the account, but they just like forgot that they did it. So they will get an email. They'll probably contact you and be like, do you know what this email is about? And you'll be like, ah, yes, good. That's what we need. And so with that email, then you can go through the like forgot my password process and get it reset. If you already know which email is the administrator, you can actually skip that step and just go to forgot my password, right? If the person, let's say the administrator no longer works at your organization, there is actually also a form that is available for you to apply to basically be added as an administrator to your Google for Nonprofit account. And there will be some steps listed. There's some help documentation on that as well. But I would not recommend creating a new account if you can avoid it, just because there's an off chance that you can get penalized. Google basically wants to avoid people creating like multiple accounts to skirt their rules. So if they think you're doing that, sometimes you can get in trouble for that. And so that's the reason that I wouldn't recommend creating a new account if you can avoid it. But Google support will be helpful there. All right, got 2 more minutes. So I am trying to make sure I answer some of these questions that I think are going to be broadly applicable. All right, this is a good one. Is it allowed to use advertising? Okay. Basically, the question is, are you allowed to use the Google Ad Grant to advertise fundraising items like a shirt for our organization or a mug? The answer is yes. You can promote things that are in some sort of shop. We have organizations that do that all the time. The caveat that I will give you is there does need to be on your shop page some sort of disclaimer about how the money benefits your organization. So something like all proceeds support World Wildlife Fund or whatever it is. Make sure that you have that somewhere visible just so that you don't run into any policy violations. All right. Is it worth it to have someone complete the application for the nonprofit? Worth it is a really subjective thing. I think that there are benefits. If you are worried that it will not go smoothly, or if your organization does not have the time, that's something. And lots of Google Ad Grant management companies like getting attention, or like others. That is a service most of them provide. My personal opinion would be, though, if this is something you're interested in, it is not a difficult application. I would actually take a swing at it yourself, unless you have like a weird situation like a couple of the ones that I've talked about, because it's not terribly complex. I think that is actually kind of the smallest barrier. I think running the ads is actually the more difficult part of it. So I think if you're feeling gutsy after this, go ahead and give it a swing. I don't know that I would bring someone on just to complete the application for the Google Ad Grant.
Visit GrantStation to see our latest online education offerings in the form of live webinars, interactive workshops, and on-demand learning. GrantStation.com, your fast track to funding and online education.